I'm Savannah Sellers. Joe is on assignment today. It's too bad because he'd help us out on that Tony segment, but you're just with me this morning. We are going to begin a new week with an escalation of attacks in the Middle East, threatening to move the region back into an all-out war and dampening the potential for a long-term ceasefire. It's now been 100 days since the war with Iran began. Israel and Iran traded retaliatory strikes, with Israel saying Iran launched missiles on Sunday. The Israeli Defense Forces say it detected missiles launched from Iran and activated air defense systems to intercept them. This comes after Israeli warplanes struck Beirut in retaliation for alleged Hezbollah attacks. Israel launched strikes on Iran earlier today in response, striking military targets in the western and central parts of Iran. This is their first direct confrontation since the April ceasefire with the United States. The U.S. military says it's monitoring the active situation between the two nations. A U.S. official says there's been no U.S. involvement in this round of attacks. In a post on Truth Social, President Trump claims that both sides are, quote, looking to do an immediate ceasefire. We will have analysis on the latest attacks as well as reaction from Washington. Let's begin with NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel, though, in Jerusalem for more on this conflict. Hey, Richard, good morning.
In a new social media post, President Trump called on Iran and Israel to immediately stop shooting after the two sides exchanged fire for the first time since the April ceasefire. It began last night when Iran launched a barrage of ballistic missiles at Israel. Israel waiting a few hours, then responding with strikes on Iran, hitting at least 7 targets, according to the Israeli military. Israel says that Iran, in total, between last night and this morning, fired around 30 ballistic missiles at Israel, nearly all of them shot down. Neither Iran nor Israel are reporting any casualties. Iran says it began this escalation. It began firing ballistic missiles at Israel in response to Israel's ongoing and still escalating offensive in Lebanon. Iran had threatened to attack Israel if Israel went through with its threat to carry out a strike on Beirut. That strike happened over the weekend when Israel attacked 2 buildings in Beirut. Israel says it attacked Beirut. It is carrying out its offensive in Lebanon to stop Hezbollah from firing into northern Israeli communities. But there was one noticeable difference in this escalation. Iran did not fire at any American warships in the Persian Gulf, any American bases in the region, or any U.S. Gulf allies. And a short time ago, a spokesman for the Iranian Foreign Ministry said that ultimately it blamed the United States for this escalation because it allows Israel to continue to violate the ceasefire. But the official added that the U.S. and Iran are still exchanging messages in a, quote, atmosphere of deep mistrust.
All right, Richard, thank you. Well, for more on this conflict, let's bring in Elise Labott. She's the host of Cosmopolitics on Substack. Elise, good morning. Thank you for being with us, as always. So this is the most serious attack since that ceasefire with Iran was reached, which was 2 months ago now. What are the biggest concerns right now as Iran and Israel exchange attacks? Do you see this sliding back into a full-blown confrontation?
Well, President Trump is, saying this morning, obviously, that Israel and Iran are ready for a ceasefire. They're, going to stop and, telling the Financial Times and others that he calls the shots. Nobody calls the shots but me. But, Savannah, the enemy has a say. And I think this is the big frustration of President Trump, that the U.S. and Iran are having these talks. But particularly this issue of Lebanon is really getting in the way of this deal between the U.S. and Iran, because Israel sees Lebanon as part of this whole war, which is pretty ironic because at the same time, they're saying this is unrelated to the talks between the U.S. and Israel. So I think this between the U.S. and Iran, So this is really, I think, the thing that's getting in the way. And I think what Iran has been able to do quite successfully is further this wedge between the U.S. and Israel. Clearly, President Trump is getting frustrated that Prime Minister Netanyahu is, not listening to him after he joined the war with Iran. And I think this is, when you join with allies, allies have their own self-interest. And so I think at this point, Israel is going ahead. It does not recognize Lebanon as part of this ceasefire. President Trump is frustrated that Iran will not continue to talk to the U.S. in a real meaningful way until this issue gets solved.
What do you make at this point of the relationship, the partnership between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu?
I think it's very frayed. I think it's always kind of been this very complex relationship. The U.S. clearly sees Israel as one of its closest allies in the region, vice versa. But at the same time, while they've been very successful in the beginning of the war, and I think going after the targets simultaneously, going after the supreme leader, while the U.S. focused on the Iranian missiles and nuclear sites and the Navy, now the interests are really, you see that they have different goals. Israel sees Lebanon and the whole Iranian regime as part of the same post-October 7th war that started with Hamas, but then you saw it went after Lebanon, then you saw it went after Iran, it went after the Houthis, and they continue to go full steam ahead, and they want to destroy the whole Iranian architecture of its proxies, its leadership, while President Trump is really, very frustrated, wants to get this deal done, wants to move on, and I think he'd be happy for something shorter than that, which clearly doesn't involve Hezbollah. And at the same time, the U.S. is talking through intermediaries to Hezbollah that says, listen, if Israel stops, we'll stop. But clearly the ceasefire, this thing of Lebanon, is really the one that's holding it up.
Elise, what do you think moves us any closer to ending these hostilities, gets ceasefire talks back on track?
Well, it's very interesting that Israel did not strike any Iranian energy infrastructure. It is being super careful here. And you saw President Trump early up, posting on social media this morning. Clearly, there are talks going on to walk this back. I think it's really going to be about whether Prime Minister Netanyahu is willing to stand down. I think the Iranians said that it would stand down if they consider this, round over, if the Israelis are willing to stop the fighting. If not, I think it could really escalate, but I think there's still time to walk it back.
All right, Elise Labott, thank you so much, as always. Now let's bring in NBC News political reporter Megan Leibowitz. We want to talk now about the latest from the Trump administration, some of it related to this as well. Elise, good morning. Megan, good morning. Big headlines this weekend right here from within our own news group when President Trump sat for this taped interview with Meet the Press. That was on Friday. He was asked about the war with Iran. He was asked about that controversial anti-weaponization fund. And we're going to get into all that in a moment. But first, we do just want to talk about this growing fallout from how the conversation ended. The president abruptly stormed out of this interview after moderator Kristen Welker repeatedly challenged his election fraud claims, kind of harking back to the 2020 election, but also talking about what's happening in California right now as votes are counted. Let's listen to some of that.
Your elections are crooked, and you're crooked, and Meet the Press is crooked, and so is ABC and CBS and CNN.
But Mr. President,
you're one-sided crooked networks. Right, let's call it quits because I've had enough. Thank you, darling. Have a good time.
Megan, walk us through what led up to this moment, what happened right there as we hear him say, I'm done, and what reaction has been like.
Yeah, so ahead of that moment where he had walked out of the interview, he had claimed multiple times that the 2020 election was rigged, and he claimed that it was happening right now in California. Now, there's no evidence to back up those claims. The 2020 election, his claims about the 2020 election were false, and Kristen Welker had repeatedly pressed him on this, had pressed him on the fact that, asking him where is his evidence, and pointing out the fact that the administration has not provided evidence for this. Now, asked about California, he had said all he has to do is look. He had also pointed to the fact that California takes a long time to count their ballots. Now, the reason that California takes a long time to count their ballots is because of state election laws, and also the fact that most voters in California ultimately vote by mail. Now, after that exchange where Kristen had pressed him multiple times on this, that's ultimately when he had left that interview. Now, Kristen also had spoke with President Trump again on Saturday, and she said yesterday on Meet the Press that when they spoke, they also both agreed that the rain had posed challenges to the interview as well. The interview had been paused multiple times because of the rain and the loud noises that it was making. And she also said, Savannah, that President Trump had agreed to sit down for another interview on Meet the Press.
All right, Megan, thank you for walking us through that. I also do want to talk about some of the topics that the president did address before the end of that interview, before he stormed off on Iran. President Trump said that if the U.S. and Iran make a deal, the countries would work together to destroy its uranium. Now, this has really been at the crux of how this war is going to come to an end, because, of course, that has to do with their nuclear program. Did he give details on how that would work?
Yeah, so this exchange came when Kristen had asked President Trump about whether the U.S. would potentially send in troops into Iran in order to retrieve Iran's nuclear stockpile. It's highly enriched uranium. Now, President Trump then responded to that, posing a scenario where the U.S. and Iran, if they come to a deal, are able to work together in order to ultimately take that uranium out and to ultimately destroy it. Take a listen to how else he said that this would go down.
But the way you do it is if we make a deal, now we're friendly, we'll all go together. It'll be our equipment. We'll take it out and destroy it, whether it's on site or whether we take it off site.
So that would require U.S. forces?
Well, that will require we will have a deal. We'll be friendly. In other words, we will have made a deal. And we will be at peace.
He went on to say that if the U.S. and Iran do not come to a deal, then the U.S. would take them out militarily, Savannah.
Let's also talk, Megan, about the anti-weaponization fund, which was temporarily blocked by a judge. And then we have acting Attorney General Todd Blanche telling lawmakers that the administration isn't moving forward with the fund. So what did the president have to say about it at this point in this interview?
Yeah, so the president did not rule out payments from taxpayer money to ultimately give to January 6th defendants who were accused of assaulting police officers. So when asked whether in that interview, whether anyone who attacked police officers during that January 6th attack on the Capitol in 2021, President Trump responded saying that he would not be inclined to say so, but he has to see it. Now, as you mentioned as well, Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche had said previously he told lawmakers that the administration was no longer pursuing this so-called anti-weaponization fund. So Kristen also asked President Trump whether he was looking to potentially revive that. Take a listen to how he responded.
So are you looking for a way to revive it?
Well, look, if it was up to me, I'd pay them the kind of money that they deserve. People have been destroyed. Lives have been destroyed. Many suicides. Think of it. People have committed suicide because a bunch of thugs went after them. So, me, personally, I think the weaponization fund is a great idea. And so do many other Republicans. You have to get it approved. If they get it approved, that's great. If they don't get it approved, I'd be disappointed.
Remember, that so-called anti-weaponization fund had gotten a whole lot of pushback from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle, including Republicans who had some pretty strong words criticizing that so-called anti-weaponization fund. That backlash had ultimately led to Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche saying that the administration wasn't going to pursue that anymore. But the president's comments raising questions about whether the administration could potentially pursue that again in the future, Savannah.
All right, Megan, thank you so much. Well, in California, ballots are still being counted, as we mentioned, in several key primary races nearly 1 week after Election Day. In the race to replace Governor Gavin Newsom, NBC News is projecting that Democrat Javier Becerra, a former Biden cabinet member, will advance to the November election, but it still remains unclear who he will face as former Fox News host Steve Hilton and Democrat Tom Steyer fight for second place. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, we are seeing a big shift in the race for mayor. Conservative candidate and former reality TV star Spencer Pratt has dropped to third place behind progressive city councilwoman Nithya Raman. The two candidates are battling it out to face Democratic Mayor Karen Bass in a November runoff. Well, Pratt has echoed President Trump's claims of election fraud, posting on X, quote, "They're not the only ones who know where to find votes," after Raman gained ground over the weekend. We will, of course, keep an eye on this race as that count continues to roll in. Well, police in Ohio are searching for at least 2 suspects who opened fire near a festival for families in Toledo on Saturday night. Investigators believe the shooters were firing at each other, but instead shot and wounded 12 other people at the Old West End Festival. One witness described the chaos as the shooting started.
It sounded like it was flying everywhere. I swear I heard one go right by me. I swear I have no idea, but I swear I heard one go right by me. It was just like it was crazy. This is not the way that we're supposed to live as a community. Like, this is not normal.
Police say all 12 victims are in stable condition. Let's get you some weather news now. Power crews in North Dakota are working to restore service after strong storms pushed through the state. Heavy rain, hail, and strong winds with gusts more than 90 miles per hour caused flooding and brought down power lines in Bismarck and the surrounding areas overnight. That comes as millions across the plains and the South remain under flood alerts this morning. On Sunday, Huntsville, Alabama got roughly 9 inches of rain in some spots. For more on what we can expect today, let's bring in meteorologist Andrea Romero. She is tracking the latest conditions as we get our work week started. Hey, Andrea, good morning.
Good morning, Savannah. And it's a serious flooding setup that we have here in parts of Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri. We have some heavy storms this morning with some flash flood warnings that are up at this time. We have 27 million people who are, in fact, under this flood watch, which is extending all the way from parts of the Central Plains into parts of the Mississippi and Tennessee valleys. So we're expecting a lot of rainfall. We can see some heavy storm activity also here in parts of Iowa. The flash flood risk will be present, especially in this area right here where hourly rates of 2 to 3 inches per hour are possible. And between today and tomorrow, we're looking at storm totals of maybe 5 to 8 inches, especially here near the Tennessee River Valley. So it's a lot of rainfall, and we could have that flash flooding occur. You want to make sure you're careful and you never run or drive or walk through any location that has any flooded streets or roads because you never know how deep the water is. The summer soaker will continue without those torrential rainfalls, those severe storms possible across the Front Range. Into tomorrow, the severe weather will be enhanced across the northern plains. That's where we're expecting that severe threat of storms for tomorrow. Today, the severe weather threat, the storm hazards are mostly over here, parts of the plains. Damaging hail of over 2-inch diameter is possible with a few tornadoes, but this weather will only increase in intensity the next couple of days. We're expecting a few strong tornadoes, perhaps in the Dakotas, for tomorrow, Tuesday, and into Wednesday and Thursday. Those hazards will continue to strengthen as they move eastward, going into the Ohio Valley, possibly by Thursday. As far as the western part of the country, we're looking at that extreme fire behavior that's possible with over 11 million people that will be impacted with those conditions out west. And we'll have more about the heat that's going to be impacting us, Savannah, this week in my hit later on in the next hour.
Okay, great, Andrea. Thank you so much. Well, for the first time since being fired from 60 Minutes, veteran correspondent Scott Pelley is speaking out. In an interview with the New York Times, he revealed he is heartbroken over what he described as editorial interference that sought to push President Trump's version of events at the network. Pelley was fired after clashing openly with new CBS News editor-in-chief Barry Weiss and new 60 Minutes executive producer Nick Bilton. Pelley also warned the news division is in crisis. Listen to this.
Right now, CBS News, in my view, is on fire. There are people in that room who go to war zones when they are pregnant. To have people running CBS News who don't know that, have never felt that, and don't understand it is a tragedy I never expected to see.
He also called on Paramount's leadership to step in. They own CBS News, saying he hoped executives would realize, quote, this isn't working. Well, jury selection is set to begin in California later this morning in the federal arson trial of Jonathan Rinderknecht. He's accused of sparking the deadly Pacific Palisades wildfires, which destroyed thousands of homes and businesses. Rinderknecht has pleaded not guilty to all charges. If convicted, he could face up to 20 years in prison. NBC News legal analyst Danny Savello here on set with us with more on this trial. Danny, good morning.
Good morning.
So help us unpack this one, because here's sort of like the quirk here. Last year, the suspect was arrested and indicted on charges directly related to a different, smaller fire that prosecutors say is what ultimately led to the Palisades fire. Unpack for us first, like, how important it would be to prove that link.
It is the entire case. And this is a fascinating, unusual legal theory, because you essentially have, for the defense, at least this is their theory, there are two separate crimes. There's the first smaller fire, which didn't do nearly as much damage. And then there's the second fire 6 days later, which caused all the damage. So you have a very unusual case here where the prosecution has to prove causation. Not that the fire caused damages, but that the suspect even caused the fire that caused the damages. You don't normally have that problem. In the case of a bank robbery, you know there was a bank robbery. You know there was a crime. In the case of other crimes like murder, you know that there was a homicide. But here, there may not have been a crime when it came to the second fire. And in fact, the government still has to prove he caused the first fire and that fire caused the second fire.
So it sounds tough to prove.
It does from a causation standpoint. The defense doesn't need to disprove anything. They just need to raise reasonable doubt. And as to that second fire, for example, they can raise reasonable doubt by pointing to all of the other ways a fire can start. Lightning, somebody else setting it, anything that could have happened 6 days later. The defense wants this to be about two fires. The prosecutions, they want this to be about one fire that spanned 6 days.
The judge actually recently warned that the prosecution's case, as you're essentially unpacking here, could confuse jurors and even lead to a legally questionable verdict, was what he said. What are the concerns that he's raising there?
At the end of every trial, the lawyers have to figure out with the judge a jury verdict form. And I know it sounds simple, but it's kind of like a flow chart. If you find this, then that. It's really hard to word these things for a jury of people who just became familiar with this case.
Right.
So the challenge is going to be explaining to them that they need to find not only that he caused the first fire, but that fire caused the second fire. So you have two causal links here that a jury could easily get confused with. I could easily get confused with it.
What do you think the defense strategy shapes up to be?
The defense strategy, really, it's interesting. The judge barred them from blaming the fire department for their negligence. I would have gone the other way. I would have said the fire department did such a good job putting out the first fire that there's more than enough reasonable doubt that the first fire had anything to do with the second fire. I mean, how could there have been a second fire with all the foam and the water and all the expert firefighters saying this fire is now out? That would be the central thesis of my case. But all the defense needs to do is create reasonable doubt, not prove some other cause of the fire.
All right, Danny Savello, thank you so much. Well, here in New York, one person is in custody after authorities say 6 people were injured in a knife attack at Penn Station last night. Officials say one person had serious injuries. Others had a range from minor to moderate wounds from the attack. The incident took place a little more than 24 hours before President Trump is expected to attend the Knicks-Spurs game tonight. And that's just above the station at Madison Square Garden, and it will be under tight security. A spokesperson for Amtrak said that all patients were stable and that a knife was recovered at the scene. A senior law enforcement official said that a person believed to have mental health issues was taken into custody. That official also says there are no early signs that the attack was related to terrorism. Now let's move upstairs to Madison Square Garden. The Knicks hold that commanding 2-0 lead in the series after winning both games in San Antonio. This right here, these are celebrations at watch parties outside Madison Square Garden after a thrilling end to Game 2. That was back on Friday night. It came down to the final seconds. Well, tonight, Knicks fans will watch their team play in the finals on their home court for the first time in nearly 3 decades. But this type of watch party, the ones that are right outside the arena, they're definitely a vibe, but they will be shut down for Game 3 after, as I just mentioned, the president announced plans to be in the building.
I'll be going to Game 3. I thought it was amazing. I think the Knicks have an amazing team, the way they played.
President Trump's attendance will add an extra blanket of security for the game with TSA-style screening protocols and a strict no-bag policy. In a statement, the Knicks are encouraging fans to arrive at least 2 hours before tip-off.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.